Om Shri Sai Ram, everyone, and welcome to our webinar titled Sealing on Water. We'll begin the session with 3 Oms and invite Swami to be with us. Om Shri Sai Ram, everyone. A warm welcome to all of you to this webinar on this wonderful occasion. My name is Shruti. I'm from New Zealand and a member of the International Environmental Sustainability Committee. It's my pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of both the Environmental Sustainability Committee as well as the Serve the Planet Committee. These webinars are a part of a series through the Go Green Network where we're really looking to bring together devotees, young adults, elders, children alike, really to learn more about the environment, our spiritual connection with it, and grow closer to Swami through transformative experiences that we hope these webinars can spark. So really wonderful to have you all here from all parts of the world. A couple of quick housekeeping matters before I introduce our guest speaker today. So as you're aware with Zoom, you'll all be unmuted. I would love your interaction throughout the session. So it'll be great if you can type your thoughts in the chat box. If you've got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box as well. How the session will be structured is we're going to have a presentation from Uncle Srinivas in a moment that will run for about 45 minutes. Following that, we'll have about 10-15 minutes of Q&A and then some closing remarks. So do put your questions throughout the session, and we'll have some time at the very end as well to go through your questions. And yeah, we'd love your participation throughout. Yeah, apart from that, yeah, really toward the end of the session also we'll share some links and resources. We'll possibly run some further trainings or workshops off the back of this as well. So keep an eye out, and we'd love your continued engagement as well. Without much further ado, I'd love to introduce you all to Srinivas Raghavan, Dr. Srinivas Raghavan, who is our wonderful guest speaker and presenter today. He's a longtime Sai devotee who resides with his wife in San Diego, California. He's been really actively involved in the SSIO in many roles and in many capacities. One, I think, that's been really prominent that many of us have engaged with him probably is through his roles in education. He's a phenomenal teacher, facilitator, trainer, has held many sort of roles in the educational elements. And I've had the pleasure of attending camps here in New Zealand with Srinivas Uncle, and I can tell you, he brings out the inner child, the joy, and he's just got such a beautiful way with children. So that's definitely one element. He's also really talented when it comes to music. He's composed many songs that we love, such as Remind Me, My Lord. And he's, been outside of sort of his involvement with the organization. He's also got a PhD in computer science, specializing in human computer experience. Has got an MBA specializing in innovation management. So really multi-talented in many facets. So we're very lucky to have him with us. He's also a member of the environmental committee, sort of focusing on education and transformation. And in terms of today's webinar, it's titled Sealing on Water, and it's got 2 sort of main focuses or objectives. One being helping us spiritually connect with water, really understand and learn more about water and the importance of it. And secondly, really to look at how we can facilitate transformative experiences. So Srinivas Uncle's got a wealth of experience in the education field, and not only education, but with SSE and facilitating transformation. So he'll be focusing a lot on the how and sort of how we can create transformative experiences for ourselves and those that we engage with through the SAI organization and beyond. So without further ado, a warm welcome to you, Srinivas Uncle, and thank you for being with us.
Sairam Shruti, very nice to, I'm grateful for your sweet introduction. To begin with, I'd like to offer a small prayer to Swami. Dear Swami, we're most grateful to you for giving us this wonderful opportunity to be here together. This is a challenging time, and we pray to you to be there and to support and care for all of those who need you in this difficult time. We pray that we will all be inspired and be able to share your love with all the people who are in need at this time. I'm most grateful to the Satyasai International Organization for the opportunity to be part of this wonderful mission, and especially to Dr. Narendranath Reddy, who's our chairperson. And also, I wish to acknowledge all the senior officers of the organization who may be present today, and all of the members and other participants, including some of you may be teachers, and in some cases you may be students as well. Welcome to all. We had a similar session this morning, and it was wonderful to meet and to be with our members from around the world. And I expect this time there's here people from the other side of the world where the time zones are different. So to just give you some idea about the presentation today, I will have, actually there's a URL at the bottom of the screen here. So if you click on or go to that tinyurl.com/sealingonwater, you can see there the spreadsheet with all of the content that you need for this, because I'll be asking some questions, and you don't need to write them down as you see it on the screen. You can just go to this site and you can follow along over there. There's a tab in that spreadsheet also that it's an electronic notebook for us, and you can add your notes, your questions in there, and makes it easier for all of us to retain all of these things together as we go. So with that, I'll continue. So if you have questions, either raise your hand, and I would expect Shruti will be able to communicate with you during this first part of the session, and then following that, we can have a Q&A. Okay, thank you. So the objectives these are the objectives of the session today. Our first objective is to raise the awareness and inspire participants on the deep spiritual connection and influence water has on our daily lives. You will see this as we go along on how we explore this awareness. The second objective is to understand how to, and it's not just what, but it is how do you develop the spiritual relationship and connection with nature? How do you foster such a relationship? And how do you manifest the connection through the practice of human values? These are questions that we will be exploring as well. Then if many of us already have such a spiritual connection, how do you go beyond the individual context to our home, school, work, etc.? Also, how do you work with others? You may be working as a group, as a team, and you may be working as a family, a group of friends, your school, your neighborhood, your community, your company, and how do you work together to broaden the spiritual relationship, not just as volunteers in the workforce, but really as one spiritual team. So these are questions that we really like to explore in this session. We'll see how far we get. So the outset, I'd like you to consider these questions, and I'm going to give you a moment to think about these two questions, because I asked the same questions to the students of the Sai Spiritual Education Program, and many of them responded, and you'll be seeing their comments and their message to these questions. So what I'd like you to do is to take a moment. If you had 30 seconds or less, what would you say water is? What would you say? Make a note of that. Then if you had 30 seconds or less to talk about sealing, what is sealing to you? What does sealing on water mean to you? And I'm going to give you 30 seconds to consider that, and then we'll continue. It's really important that you set this baseline with respect to what you think. Don't think too hard, just make a note. And then you can observe and compare as we go along with what others are saying and what you consider as we go through this presentation. So I'll give you 30 seconds to go through this. I'm going to play a video to share with you some water facts. This kind of summarizes the state of water today in the world, and it's created by GE, their innovation team, and I believe you'll enjoy watching this, although it can be quite interesting when you observe the facts. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed watching that. The United Nations has put together a World Water Development Report, and the latest one for 2020 is available online. It's also on the spreadsheet in the notebook. You'll find on the main tab, you'll find a link. You can go and take a look if you're interested in reading. And the recommendation is the 4 R's to reduce consumption is number 1. Reuse as much as you can instead of wasting. Recycle the things that are natural resources, and refuse to use things that consume natural resources but are not renewable. So these recommendations are given to us, and actually as we consider these recommendations, we'd like to see how can we implement this. What is it that allows us to do this, to implement it, and to practice these simple recommendations, and what prevents us from doing that? That's what we want to explore. So as I mentioned to you, I asked some of our science spiritual education students the same questions that I asked you at the beginning. And here are some of their answers, and you'll see how they look at water. And I'll play these videos and then we can talk about them.
To me, water is the foundation of all life, without which we may not exist. Sairam.
Water is one of the 5 Panchabhutas, and it is the very essence of life itself.
Sairam. The universe is made up of 5 elements: earth, wind, water, fire, and ether. 2/3 of the earth is covered with water. 2/3 of our body is also covered with water. Hence, water is a basic essential for our living.
Water is in all living beings. Without water, life won't exist. Water is Prantatva, the life of all living beings.
It's basically common knowledge that nothing can survive without water. If we woke up one day and there was no water, we wouldn't survive, our animals wouldn't survive, no food would survive, we would all die. Overall, I think water is just the most important thing that one would need in life. I mean, we could live without phones. We could live without a house. But without water, nobody can survive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, as you can see, our students, the students, when I asked them the question, they were very proactive and very quick in responding. Also, I had requested that they ask their friends, and so you'll see many of them have requested their friends to answer these questions. So here's an interesting perspective. So as you know, all of us know, we're in the midst of an extraordinary situation in the entire history of humankind. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and we have this global spread of this this challenging situation. During the situation, we have restricted ourselves to essential services only to be available. And here's one of our students who believes and who speaks about water is human essential.
Sarah, today we're going to be talking about what water means to me. To me, water is a human essential because without water we can't live. I also think it is a sanitary product because we should always stay clean, and like Swami said, cleanliness leads to godliness, and water plays an important role apart from wind and sun on growing plants, and plants start the food chain, which is really important for the world. And fun fact, did you know that hydrogen burns itself and oxygen helps burn it, but when you mix 2 portions of hydrogen and 1 portion of oxygen, it stops the burning altogether, which is water? Yep, it's true. Sarah. H2, oh yeah.
Thank you, Kusala. As we can see, the water is as a resource is reducing or shrinking resource on the planet, and we have 7 billion people, and 1.2 billion don't have access to drinking water. So there are many challenges related to water, and here's some tips that have been put together on what can we do. What are some water conservation tips? So 5-minute showers, take a half glass of water, drink it, and then ask for more. Use the economy mode in washing, not just with the machines, but also when you do it manually. Reuse water for plants and in the garden, reduce the water footprint. So here's, this gives you an idea of what is the footprint we have percentage-wise with our consumption of water. 30% is going down the toilets. Another 25%, 1/4, is going towards miscellaneous things like including leaks, cars and plants, etc. Washing is another 25%, clothes and personal washing. And then the kitchen and dishwasher and drinking adds the remaining. Drinking is the smallest in terms of percentage. So if you look at these, it seems pretty obvious what needs to be done. The question is, are we able to do it, and are we doing it consistently? So what makes us to follow these recommendations, not just as an individual, but as a group, right? So in some cases, we have to do this on our own first, and then as a larger group, maybe a family, maybe a school or community. What allows us to do that together? At this time, I'd like you to consider two questions and reflect on these questions. What would it take to reduce our water footprint? Would we comply with the recommendations? Some of the time, none of the time, or all of the time? Please make a note of your answers to these questions, just you personally. You don't have to send it to everybody. If you'd like to, you could add it to the notebook, which keeps it in our record. But think about this. Would you comply? And would you comply consistently all of the time? It's a good question, isn't it? So as you consider these questions, it's important to see what is the self-development process. The self-development process has certain 4 parts that I'm showing you here. One is awareness. So many people simply are not aware of what these recommendations are. So for example, these recommendations, not everybody may be aware of it. They just don't know that this is the water footprint percentage. So it's good to become aware. But just because you're aware, does it mean you'll be willing to comply to do this? Well, you need to be inspired, and we'll see what are some things that actually inspire us. When you're inspired, is it sufficient? Would you then be able to say, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do 5 minutes or less showers? Yes, maybe you do it. But what about after a few months, and when it rains and starts pouring, would you still comply with the 5-minute showers? So, of course, with all of these, Swami is our best example, right? He would, if you have observed him, he would turn off the electricity, he would turn off the fan, he would turn off the lights, he would make sure that that his usage of the resources, even individually, as a group, as the entire community, that would be consistent with the message that he communicated. So there are many who inspire us, and I'd like to give one example of Mahatma Gandhi. His grandson, I attended a talk by his grandson, and he was sharing about his grandfather. So Mahatma Gandhi had a principle that grandfather would give the grandson pencils, right, to write. And he would give him the pencil, and when the pencil is used, then he has to bring it back so that he can get a new one. And to get a new one, he has to show grandpa the pencil, and it needs to be really unusable anymore because the size is shrunk. If he doesn't show it, he won't get a new pencil. So grandson wanted a new pencil, right? And so he figured, it's kind of small, so let me just throw it away in the garden and come back and tell grandpa that it's not, I don't have a pencil anymore. So he did that, and grandfather said, where is the old pencil? You have to bring that, otherwise I can't give you a new one. So he went away and came back without the pencil. Grandfather said, where is the pencil? She said, I lost it. Where did you lose it? Well, it was evening, and sure enough, grandpa came with him to the garden, and they looked everywhere and found the pencil. He looked at it and said, you can still use this. Continue with it. And so grandson had to continue with it. He remembered to the time the impact that it had on him. So the inspiration of people who set such an example allows us to want to experience this connection. And when we experience it, it's good to share. So this process goes in a cycle that as you increase your awareness and you're inspired to experience, you can come back and share from those experiences. So here are the students. Since I asked them what is water to them, this is an interesting video to see how they raise our awareness.
Water is the sustenance of life. Without it, we couldn't function or even survive as a human civilization.
To me, water is both life and death. It is life because it sustains us and we need it in order to survive, but because there's so little drinking water left, it is also our death, because there will probably be wars fought in the future over water, and so many people don't have access to clean water, so it's just hurting them.
I think to me, water presents itself in the form of rain as the most clear image in my mind, and the most clear presentation of itself is through its renewal properties, because when you are suffering and when there's dark times, you usually think about rain. You think about you're struggling, you cry, and there's the rainfall. And I think that rain can sometimes be a metaphor for suffering, and that the ability to dance in the rain and the ability to get through that suffering and find the beautiful, beautiful parts of that rain is what water signifies to me. It's a renewal, it's an appreciation for the goodness and the beauty that is found in humankind.
So you see the students, they're going beyond what is the apparent, the physical, to behind the curtain to see what it means to them. And this is where we are exploring in our programs the spiritual connection that lies behind the physical nature of this world. I'd like you to consider the following questions. Observing these children, what do you think of the following? How do they perceive distance or separation between them and nature, between them and their self, and between them and others? So this perceived distance or separation is the key to understand this development process. So in the self-development process, a metric or measure that you can use is to see what is the distance of separation you experience between yourself, the nature, between yourself and yourself, and between you and others. Okay? The more the perceived distance, the more challenging you feel, more challenges you experience. The less the perceived distance, the more you have a spiritual connection. So make a note of this from yourself, in your own point of view, and then compare with what you see from the children and what they're saying. Water is inspiration.
All of these vessels have different shapes, sizes, and colors. However, the water in them is the same. Likewise, the Swami inside all of us is the same. However, each person is different and unique in their own way, just like these vessels. Sairam.
Water means to me purity because it purifies people and gives life to everyone.
Water means to me it purifies everybody's mind, and we cannot live without water.
Water is pure and transparent. I want my thoughts to be pure and transparent. Sairam.
Sairam. Swami says that water is a life source. And to me, water means cooling me down on the inside, meaning when I'm angry, and cooling me down on the outside when I want to quench my thirst. Sairam.
It's inspirational to see the children, because they have the ability to demonstrate practice and demonstrate what these things mean. So as you can see, they have a special connection with water, and they are expressing it by doing something about it. And therefore, in the development, in the self-development process, you have another testament or metric that you can use. One is the distance, the other is demonstration. So that which is demonstrated is inspiring. That which is demonstrated creates an interest to experience, and sharing through demonstration also raises the awareness for others. So it goes in a cycle. The topic for this webinar we had chosen as sealing on water. So I asked the students, what is sealing and what does sealing on water mean? Now, interestingly, it is also good for us to make a note. What did you say at the beginning of this session? Sealing is water, or sealing on water is. Sealing on water is limit. That's what they say.
Sairam, a ceiling is a limit. In the case of water, the limit of how much we should use water to. Many people waste water, which causes people in drier climates to not have water. Plants also need water, and so do animals. Wasting water has many effects on the earth. Sairam.
Sairam. My name is Karina, and I'm an SSEHV student. Swami always wanted to teach us about sealing on desires, especially with water. Water is a very limited resource on the planet, so that means we have to conserve water. The next time you want to take a long shower, think about Swami's words and how you can help save the planet and conserve water.
Sairam, there are two things I do to conserve water. The first thing is when I brush my teeth and while it's in my mouth, I turn off the faucet just so that it doesn't waste the running water. The second thing I do is that when I'm taking a shower and I'm putting soap in my hair, I turn off the shower faucet. There's no point in keeping it on when I'm just washing my hair. Thanks.
Thank you. So, sealing on water is limit, and we've seen Swami's program of sealing on desires, and how we could what we can do to limit our consumption, right? So but here's another thing, that another dimension that we should look in the self-development process is the use of vocabulary. So vocabulary things that we commonly use, words and phrases, sentences, even gestures and things, everything has an association. So to you, sealing is associated with limit, or sealing is associated with sealing on desires, because maybe you are familiar with the program that Swami initiated. Now, is that the same for everyone, right? Because it may not be. Therefore, you have to keep in mind when you speak, are you speaking the same connotation, the same association between words and its meaning as others? So interestingly, if you, so this is what I would like you to consider. In our daily language, we have commonly used vocabulary. What associations do these words have? Does it increase or decrease the distance or separation? Remember, for the self-development, the metrics you can use, one of them is the distance or separation. The second one you can use is also the vocabulary that you're seeing, right? And or another one is the vocabulary. So the words water, sealing, self, God, what connotation do these have? What does it mean to you? So I did a Google search, and here's what I got back. I typed in sealing on water, and interestingly, the word sealing is associated with the roof or the ceiling of your house. And it says, do you want somebody to come and fix why is there water on my ceiling? It's what to do if water comes through the ceiling. So you see, the association that we may have is not always the same as the association other people may have. So it's important for us when we speak to remember that these associations can be different, first of all, right, for different people. And also it could create distance or separation or bring you closer. You should examine. The other one is demonstration. So I said distance, demonstration, and vocabulary. Three dimensions that I have that I'm presenting to you to consider. So I'd like to share this example of experiencing the spiritual connection and sharing with a larger community. So a few years ago, we had I had a group of students in the spiritual education program, and the students, one day, one of the students came up and said they'd like to start a club. And I asked them, what would you like the club to be called? And they said, well, we'd like to be called Little Hearts for Mother Sai. And then after some time they changed it and they said, no, we'd like it to be Little Hearts for Mother Earth, because they wanted to do something for nature. And so over a 3-year period, they came up with a plan and executed year by year. Every year they went step by step. So the first year they worked only with themselves as students, and we put together a recycled tree, meaning not a real tree, but a tree made out of recycled materials. The tree did not have any leaves. That was the job of the students, to populate the tree with leaves. And to put a leaf on the tree, an actual physical paper that you would attach, or a piece of leaf, then you would have to, as an individual, take up one sadhana or one spiritual practice for the towards the environment, and practice it for 5 consecutive days. If you miss one day, you got to restart the 5. So when you finish 5 consecutive days, you can come back and add a leaf to the tree. So the tree started getting populated. On one side, the girls took over one side and the boys took over one side, and they started, competing with each other to populate the trees. Of course, they have to follow the rule. It has to be something, you have to take up something which is not just your ordinary duty. It doesn't count you say that I slept 5 consecutive days. Or I went to school every day for 5 consecutive days, or my mother did her work at home, or work in the office for 5 consecutive days. They said, no, that doesn't count. Those are things that you're expected to do, but this is something you take up. Could be you turn off the faucet, as our young friend said, while brushing your teeth, you turn off the faucet, and so on. So they did that for the first year and successfully populated the tree. The second year, they decided to include the members of the center, and so they did a presentation to the center members and started this program. We actually have a website, treesoflove.org, and then they had a registration. You can actually track your activities and so on. And sure enough, the trees started getting populated. In the 3rd year, they decided to add roots. So this actually was broader, and so they said that at the end of the year we'll plant trees and water them. That was the goal. So to plant one tree, they said we need 38 roots. So there's a reason behind the number, but I won't go into that right now. So each root, a team of people, like a class or a family, they have to work together for 5 consecutive days. All of them have to do the same thing. So if you have to turn off your faucet, everybody has to turn off the faucet for 5 consecutive days. If one of them misses, all 5 start together. All of them start together for 5 days. So they worked as a team together, and executed on this. And at the end of the year, they also included members of all 4 centers in our area. And so there was a broader group of people working together. And at the end of the year, they had 52 trees to plant. So you can do the math in what it means towards their sadhana. And here's what happened on the day of the planting.
Plenty of digging and plenty of trees, so we're gonna have, don't feel like you're gonna run out or it's my turn to dig. Oh, you'll have time. Real pleasure. I really had fun today. It meant a lot to the preserve, to the River Park Foundation, and to me personally. I'd like to get a round of applause for yourselves. Oh, you did a wonderful job. And then maybe we get a round of applause for your volunteer leaders. Yeah. All right, there we go.
So an interesting thing happened, and let me tell you this particular scene of the video captures this. Yes. So you notice that they're looking up at the sky, right? So a very interesting thing happened. The day we had organized this, the San Diego River Park Foundation was the organization that we were very happy to work with them to plant trees. We wanted to plant, they wanted to plant, came together because they are also in the nature conservation space. So anyway, San Diego is known for very low rainfall. We have the ocean on one side and mountains on the other side. Beyond the mountains, there's desert. So the rainfall is very, very minimal. But on that morning, the morning of our planting, it started pouring a hailstorm. There was ice blocks. It's unheard of. But that morning, it was pouring. When we prayed to Swami to see what should be done, when we reached there to the location and it was time to start the planting, the rain stopped, and then everybody proceeded. And as we finished the planting and they were looking up at the sky, the clouds came back and it started to rain again. Needless to say, the ground was very hard and difficult. The water in the form of rain came down to help the children to work with this land, and after we finished planting, the saplings also needed the water. Subsequently, we used to go plant, we used to go on a regular basis to go and water these young saplings to help them to be successful, to become successful trees. The children who are here have since grown up, and it's a pleasure to see as they, just as trees grow from saplings into big trees that provide shade for everyone. So also our students, they and children of the world, they grow up from being young saplings into tremendous resources for this world. Yes, good. So I want to come back to our discussion, going beyond the physical manifestation of water to and to see what would motivate you to comply with the recommendations. So we had the simple recommendations: 5-minute showers, drink half a glass of water first and then drink more, and so on. Reduce your consumption. So is everybody motivated the same way? Will everyone comply? Actually, it turns out that compliance is a very challenging thing for the human species, and you can see that we have laws, and we have police who are there to monitor and these laws, and then or law enforcement, and then you have the judiciary system to help resolve conflicts and so on. And so compliance is indeed a challenge for the species. So here's what the two ends of motivation to comply look like. Right? There's, on one side, you have self-motivated. That's 100% compliance. You don't need to say anything to them. They seem to be quite fine, and they do everything before you even have to say anything. And on the other side, there's not responsible, 0% compliance, and they don't seem to care. Regardless of what you may say or do, they don't comply. And what about in the middle? Right? So in the middle, we have some who want to comply in this category. Now, they need a usable solution, and if they have a usable solution, very likely they would comply. For example, in the case of the shower, consider if you had a faucet or a device that attaches to your faucet that does the following, right? It prevents cold water from coming, so it doesn't waste any water. When the water is warm, then it starts you can turn it on, and it gives you a sign, it's ready, and you say, yes, I'm ready to take a shower now. And it has a timer built into it, so as soon as the timer is done, say 5 minutes in this case, which you can set, let's say, and it gives you a warning, says I'm about to shut off, so you might want to finish your bath. Now this is a usable solution, it's a practical one actually, and these would be, so those who are in the want to comply, they have intent, but they may not have a solution that works. So they, given the solution, they do it, right? So then there's the willing to try. They're willing to try, but they may not be able to put a lot of effort, because motivation or intention may be a little bit lower. So they wouldn't go out of their way, but they need help. Then there's the can go either way. They could go towards this way, towards the motivated, or towards the other direction, which is not motivated, not responsible. So they can go towards compliance or towards no compliance by association. So the power of association is another one that another dimension you can use in the self-development process to see, I said distance or separation, demonstration, right? Vocabulary, and also association. These are dimensions that you can use to assess where you stand and what you need to do. So if you look at the connection between all of these, so this is the entire spectrum. if you look at the connection between them, then we can examine what can we do to help us to be self-motivated, to teach our children to be self-motivated, to impact those in our context, including our family or science center or community. How can we impact them so that they are self-motivated? And so this is a journey where we can build skill towards doing this. To do that, it helps if you understand what is the connections between these things. So motivation to comply. The self-motivated have a sense of self-awareness. They know themselves. They know what they believe in, and they believe in it regardless of what anybody may say to them. So even self-motivated doesn't necessarily mean deep spirituality. It could just be that they know who they are, and they're fine with it, and they do what they believe in. So they have a sense of self-confidence because they have this awareness. So the want to comply group, if they have self-experience, then they can move towards this self-motivated. They want to comply, they need some tools, which I gave you an example of. The willing to try, they need some awareness. What are we supposed to do? We don't know what we're supposed to. We know that we have good intention. We feel good. We're like, we want to do this. We're willing to try it, but we don't know what to do. So if you help them with what should be done, then you can move them in that direction. The ones that can go either way, by good habits, inspiring them to change, would move them in the right direction. The last one, it typically requires some serious intervention. And unfortunately, crises such as the one that we're in tends to become an intervention and brings about change. So in some way, the crisis moves people from here towards this direction. And although it doesn't have to be a crisis that takes you in that direction, but unfortunately, sometimes that's what is required. So this is a map, and I'd like you to consider, where do you stand? Where do we place ourselves on the compliance motivation map? As an individual, maybe as a family, maybe as a site center, maybe as a community. Where do you stand in this compliance map, and how can you change your position in the map more towards the self-motivated? And in doing that is where we can use the self-development process. And the self-development process, as I mentioned, the dimensions allow you to know where you stand. Are we self-motivated? Maybe. What would that? How would we know? Well, you can see the distance between you and water. Do you think of water as something that belongs to you, or something that you own, or is yours to use, or you feel there's a distance? It's somebody else's. I have to take their, use it appropriately per the rules of whatever the society says, or maybe you feel that oneness with it. So that changes how you interact with water, with nature, and so on. So this process will help you to go beyond just obvious compliance to really making it a meaningful journey and an enjoyable one to go with it. So sometimes we think of all of this in a because there's a challenge. We could think that it's impossible, not possible, but those things don't really help. Just because you don't consume water doesn't mean water will be there. So looking at the big picture, it's important for us to take a positive approach, work in a systematic manner, so that we are self-aware, self-motivated, self-determined, and take the actions that really we can. So to do this, I'd like to conclude today with a quote from Swami, and here's what he has to say about this motivation. Each cell in the body is motivated by the Atma self. Of course, the Atma self is everywhere at all times. It is like milk and its color. It is white everywhere at all times under all conditions. As milk, or so regardless of whether milk is milk or as butter, cream or ghee, doesn't matter the form of milk, it continues to retain its color white. So too the Atma or the self persists unchanged, however many changes the thing motivated by it may undergo. So this world is a manifestation of this self, and regardless of what transformation it goes through, the underlying self remains the same. That's what is said here. The Atma self contacts the senses of perception and affects the mind. It awakens the intellect to discriminate and decide upon the lines of action. The Atma self activates the instruments of thought, speech, and action, of expression and communication. Therefore, if you connect with this self, then all of the expression through our senses of perception, the mind, our vocabulary, our actions, all of that flows just like water flows. Water, an important property of water is that it flows, and you call it fluid, right? And similarly, when we have this connection with the self, then everything flows. We don't have to force it, and any blocks get removed, eliminated. So we experience this beautiful connection with nature. I'd like to stop here, and I know it's time for the next part of this this webinar to have Q&A. So I'll give it over to Shruti if you can moderate the questions and let me know what you'd like me to answer.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, Srinivas Uncle. We've got time for a couple of questions before we wrap up. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please note them in the chat box, and we'd love to hear them and address them. We've had one question come through. It's quite a long one and some great points that Sister Nidhi's raised from New Zealand. Nidhi, would you like to unmute yourself and just, if you can kind of briefly share sort of the essence, or from those questions you shared, the one or two sort of most pertinent ones, and we can, if it's, part of the Srinivas Uncle may have some thoughts, and also there's some other members of the Environmental Committee on the call who may be able to support as well. So feel free to unmute yourself, Nidhi, if you're able to.
I think you have to unmute the participant.
I can go ahead and read it in the interest of time. So in essence, the question is, so what are the active steps the SSIO can take to promote water conservation sort of organization-wide? And how can we change the vocabulary so it becomes, so conservation is part of our everyday vocabulary? How can we promote more tree planting as a way to prevent soil erosion? What can we do more in our daily lives, like water harvesting? So really, what more can the organization do, or what is it doing, and what more can it do, both organizationally, but also at a very kind of personal center, or home-based level as well? And I hear a real sense of wanting some practical dimension beyond the theory. Did you have any thoughts you wanted to share first, Srinivas Uncle?
Actually, I think, Shruti, you would be the best person to answer that. I think you're at the forefront of organizing, not only through the organization, but also internationally. Or I would like to hear how you respond to them. I think some of the answers are already built into the question, so that would be an interesting thing for you to comment on.
Yeah, sure. So it's a great question, Nidhi. So I guess a couple of initial thoughts is, the organization, I think in the last few years following the Go Green conference, has really put more energy in sort of the whole environmental space more broadly, of which water is obviously, and tree planting is a major component. One sort of initiative is the Serve the Planet initiative that the young adults are leading, and there's an amazing set of resources, study circle guides, tips and practical ways in which we can bring this into our own lives. And so young adults around the world have sort of taken that and run with it, running workshops, engaging in interfaith activities and public tree planting and cleanups. I know a number of centers in different countries have targets for Swami's 95th birthday, and they're trying to plant 108, 1,008. There's all sorts of numbers, and we're using Swami's birthday as a motivation to sort of inspire us to come together and take more activity and more action. One of the other things our environmental committee is doing is we've recently set up Envirocare coordinators in different countries and zones to really help lead this at a grassroots level. And I think our committee is wary that at a global level we can say things, but a lot of this is really driven in the grassroots by passionate people like many of you on this call, who I know are actually doing a lot in your local communities, be it in your home, in your center, or beyond in the community as well. So we've got these coordinators in place, checklists and guides and webinars and I guess things in many ways that are trying to move them along the compliance frame that Srinivas Uncle shared. So that's one thing we're doing. All of this is to say we've got a long way to go, and there's a lot more we could be doing personally and collectively. And so if any of you have ideas, our committee is always open to hear them, to hear suggestions, to see how we can support at a sort of international level. And I think more so a lot of this will really be driven at the grassroots. So it's a great chance to sort of talk to your center or national leaders and take some ideas forward. Generally, the organization has been sort of tremendously supportive and enthusiastic to sort of take ideas forward, and we can share more information offline about specific activities that we're seeing happen all around the world, but there's lots in the space of tree planting and cleanups. I think are sort of one that we've seen a lot of change. So happy to share more and sort of a follow-up now as well. Anything you'd like to add, Srinivas Uncle? If anyone has any thoughts as well,
very good. So,
feel free to chat in the box.
Yes, if you have other questions, if there are any other questions, let me know.
We've had a couple more questions come in. So one's just sort of, I suppose, a comment or a question. Could the word limit be used to promote the idea of sealing with water as limits for water, as sort of a language that might help connect us more? I think this is really addressing your point, Srinivas Uncle, on, how is our language sort of bringing us closer or separating us? So any thoughts on the word limit or other thoughts that you might have on language?
Yes, so, it's and Shruti, maybe if there's any other questions, you tell me then, because of the interest of time, maybe we won't have a chance to ask questions. So let me know anything else, and then I can combine the answer.
Yeah, perfect. I'll just, we've had a couple more come in. So one is, will there be global or national initiatives where people can sign up annually to Go Green Pilgrimage? We can, nothing at a global level, but there's many national initiatives on that one, Purnima. We can send more information sort of offline with a follow-up email. There's this, I think, a slightly technical question on the water cycle. So do we understand what water cycle means and the importance of getting the water in a productive or useful stage? So I'm not sure if we'll have a chance to address this, but it's one we could take offline. So thank you for the question. And the last one is a comment. In SSE classes, we have also highlighted that values can be derived relating to water. This can also be included as a suggestion. So how we can link values and water. So any sort of thoughts or comments on that as well, Srinivas Uncle. Thank you for listening to all that.
Yeah, very good. I know there's we have a few minutes and before we conclude. So I'll again, once again, take you back to the questions that we went through. So if you take a look at your answers from the beginning of the session and reflect back and say, how would it change based on what you heard from the students, from the perspective that Swami gave, and then reflect back and see, does it change your thinking? The question is not what you can do. I mean, there's so many things you can do. Would you be willing to do it all of the time, some of the time, or none of the time? That's the question. And really, so if suppose someone said, limit is not really the best use of vocabulary, we would like you to use something else. Would you do that all of the time, some of the time, none of the time? So these all depend on so behavior is dependent on who you are, your being, and where you come from, your belonging. So it's more important to change your sense of identity, because then naturally you will change your behavior as a consequence. So for example, or where you come from. So for example, if you say you are from the Audubon Society, suddenly you have the love for the birds, and you wish to protect the animals and so on. So so it's important to see what is where do you come from, your pedigree, if I may say that, and do those with whom you associate, including words, do they actually reflect this sense of removal of separation, elimination of distance, or do they increase the distance? Then you know where you should belong to, where you shouldn't belong to. So if you try to change behavior, it's like it's like straightening the tail of a dog, right? If it's curled up and you straighten it out, it's going to come back and twirl again. So so doing things at the behavior level is good, nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't necessarily have the long-term effect. So if you want to play for the long term, then look to change where you belong. Look to change who you are and your identity. This will allow you to work towards a more impactful and longer term change. So it's not necessarily the words that you're using, but where do you belong? If you change that, then automatically the words that you use will change. So if you are in association with Swami, naturally your words will start becoming softer. Your language will be considerate. You will check with the context and see if those words that you use actually have the desired effect or not, and so on. So this is in some cases you do have to use the vocabulary to bring about change or transformation. It's not always the case that you just comply, or the word love or the human values again are not words. And maybe, Shruti, do we have 1 minute?
Yep, go on.
So just to conclude, I'll maybe use this small video from Swami, because that will give you an idea of what he says, right? So because we talk about human values, what is really this human values mean, and what does he say?
Here are 5 fingers.
Satya, Dharma, Shanti, Prema, Ahimsa.
The 5 fingers, Satya, Dharma, Shanti, Prema, Ahimsa.
ఈ 5 ఏకమైనప్పుడే నేను ఈ టంబ్లర్ ను పట్టుకోవడానికి వీలవుతుంది.
When all the 5 fingers act together, you can hold the tumbler.
ఇది ఒక వేలుతో పట్టుకోవడానికి అవుతుందా?
Can you catch hold of it with 1 finger?
లేక ఇంకో వేలుతో పట్టుకోవడానికి అవుతుందా?
Can you point with the pointed finger?
కనుక అన్నిటినీ చేర్చి మనము ఇదే హ్యూమన్ వాల్యూ.
We should join all the 5 fingers, that is human value.
5 fingers ను సెపరేట్ చేయకండి.
Never separate 5 fingers.
ఈ 5 fingers కు కోఆపరేషన్ ఇవ్వాలి.
So these the bringing together, eliminating the distance, eliminating the difference, this is what would help you to manifest the human value. If we value something, then we say it has value. But if you value something, it shows in your words, it shows in your actions. So contrarily, your words and your actions also indicate what you value. So this if you value nature, then it shows in your thoughts and in your words and in your actions. If you value human, it shows in your thoughts, words, and actions. If you value yourself, that also shows is reflected in your thoughts and your words and your actions. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be here together with everyone. I pray to Swami once again for giving us this chance to be here and to discuss this important spiritual connection with Mother Nature, especially with water, given the challenges that we face. I'm very appreciative for all of you for taking this time being here, and also thank you to the organizers, Shruti and the committee. Sai Ram, Shruti, I hand it over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, just as we come to a close, is just to build on what Srinivas Uncle said, a massive thank you to all of you for joining. It's been wonderful to have you spend some of your weekend on this event with us. And a huge thank you to you, Srinivas Uncle. I think it was beautiful. I think personally, what I really took away was one, the self-transformation process of awareness, inspiration, experience, sharing, and how that's something we can relate to water or any topic really that we apply or want to transform personally, or those that we live with, be it our family, the children we work with, our members in our centre. And thank you also for the very thought-provoking questions that you shared throughout the presentation. You know, is this language, is what I'm doing connecting me, bringing me closer to nature, to myself, to others? Is it separating me? Beautiful question. And also the compliance map, again, something we can really reflect on personally in our own journey. So beautiful. Thank you so much. To all of you that have joined, I noticed a few more comments have come in. We'd love to continue the dialogue. So please reach us at gogreen@ssi.org. It's the email that we sent you the information from. So share your thoughts, your ideas. If you want to connect up with local leaders, if you want to become an environmental coordinator in your region and there isn't one currently, please contact us and we can do our best to support you, share more information with you, and we'll be in touch about further activities from here. So thank you, all of you. Huge gratitude to our beloved Swami for bringing us together. And let's close the session with one Om and three Shantis. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.